Good morning. I'm Rob White. I'm the Communications Director for Alumni Relations and Development, and I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker. We billed Karin Muller as an author, filmmaker, photographer, and adventurer. She bills herself as a vagabond. In 1995, Karin hitchhiked across Vietnam to produce a highly acclaimed PBS special and companion book. In 1998, she did the same along the Inca Road in South America. Her website, Anatomy of an Inca Adventure, gives us a sense of what her work there involved. Diet, guinea pigs, chicha, which is a boiled cassava plant fermented with human saliva, jerky, quinoa stew, and something called liquid fur, which is a mixture of cornmeal and honey. Her transportation: hitchhiking, motorbike, train, bus, truck, reed boat, horse, mule, plane, foot. Number of bulls she fought: 11. Landmines unearthed: 7. Helicopters crashed: 1. Taking preparation is everything to an entirely new level. Karin got ready for her new adventure in Japan by learning Japanese and by studying judo for about 9 years. Both paid off. She followed the dervish mountain cults through their ritual firewalking, icy waterfall immersion, and exorcism. She joined a samurai mounted archery team and learned how to handle a long bow on a galloping horse. She made a 900-mile pilgrimage in the footsteps of Japan's most famous saint and helped light 10,000 floating lanterns during the Festival of the Dead. The result is Japanland, a documentary series that premiered on PBS in November 2005. The New York Public Library called her companion book one of the year's top 25. Karin speaks English, Spanish, German, and Tagalog. She served as a Peace Corps volunteer. She lectures on Japan for the National Geographic Society. She's been featured on National Public Radio and writes for National Geographic magazine, and she flies hang gliders competitively. Let's have a warm hand for Karin Muller, 87.
Thank you. Clean up pretty good, huh? Wow, that was great. You can just keep going. I'm going to start with a very brief overview, just an introductory clip to kind of give you some feeling for what I was trying to accomplish in Japan. I'd like to say very quickly, anybody who was in the first lecture this morning on aging, if you just want to walk and do a loop and get your 30 minutes in, that's great. Just go around. Let's cue up that first clip.
There's a side of Japan that you've seen before, and a side that you have not. My name is Karin Muller. For the past 9 years, I've studied judo, and I've come to Japan to continue with my training. But I'm not here just to master new techniques. It's Japan itself that fascinates me. My real goal is to become a part of the society, to somehow learn to fit in. The problem is, I'm about the furthest thing there is from being Japanese. I'm impetuous. I'm often foolish. And I have a tendency to show off. I think my only chance is to go alone for an entire year, without a translator or a camera crew, to do my best to follow all the rules. And, of course, to learn Japanese. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to make it in a society run by men. while still learning to be a proper woman. This is the story of my year-long journey into a mysterious and complicated land that yearns for the past while rushing headlong into the future, that keeps abreast of all the latest fads and fashions, and yet has its own unique idea of what is beautiful and sexy, who produce some of the world's most sophisticated technology, and yet still live relatively simple lives. A people who cherish beauty, and yet have a taste for violence. A culture that seems so westernized, and yet isn't. I've come to find and understand the ancient heart of this modern land.
Before I start talking about Japan, let me just elaborate very briefly on how I travel. I want to try and give you some context for those experiences that you're going to see, essentially so you can grade me before you decide whether you believe any of this stuff. I usually try and follow a set of rules on any of these trips. I try and go for a very long time, a year if I can do it, even 2. What you're trying to do with this is really to make that trip a way of life. You know, most of us have, if you have a job, you've got 2 weeks out in the field somewhere on a vacation, and you spend a lot of time saying, gosh, did I pay my electric bill? You know, did I turn off the lights downstairs? When you're out there for a year, that becomes your life, and you really dive into it. I also learn the language. That's absolutely essential. Otherwise, you're stuck speaking only to this narrow strata of people who speak English. And I walked a 900-mile pilgrimage. And louder? Okay. I'm sorry. Can we turn up the mics? I will also speak louder, but it would be. If I'm on a 900-mile walking pilgrimage, I want to be able to turn to the person who's walking next to me, another pilgrim, and say, why are you carrying your wife's ashes in a little urn around your neck? You really do need the language in order to fully understand the society. The third thing I try and do is blend in, which is why I travel alone. But it also means, for example, if I go into a monastery, I will go in as an acolyte. I'll go in for a month, and I will get up at 4 in the morning, I'll chant sutras for 7 hours, I'll clean the floors, I'll do everything that an acolyte does, and I won't even take my camera out for 2 weeks until I've made friends and everybody's gotten used to me. And then when I do start to film, it's not a big deal. When a film crew comes through with big lights and cameras, everybody stops because this is an interesting thing, and so I want to get the real experience, and for that I have to speak the language, I have to go by myself, and I have to dedicate the time it takes. Related to that is I go alone for exactly the same reason. It's much easier to blend in if you're a single person in a village. Even if you're 2, there's this feeling that you're a unit and people leave you alone. If you're a woman traveling alone, personally I think that's a great way to do it because you are perceived as lonely and you're very approachable. So people are constantly coming up to you and trying to engage and interact with you. And finally, and this is really my choice, but it turns out to be really good, I travel on a shoestring. I prefer hitchhiking over any other form of transportation because when I hitchhike, I insert myself at a lower level of society as opposed to showing up in a smoky windowed SUV, throwing money around, getting back in and keep going. When you hitchhike, you get into a truck at 4 in the morning and you're 16 hours in that truck. You know everything about the driver. You know how many teeth he has and how many siblings and what the onions are going, what he's going to do with them and whether his sister likes cheese. You get an immersion experience. Now, in Japan, I did this series in my year there on spec. Am I doing that? Oh. Get rid of that. Sorry. This is not my natural habitat. You wouldn't think I had a degree in economics at Williams because I chose the most expensive country in the world in which to put my life savings on a speculative project. So it really wasn't a choice. I was on an unbelievable shoestring. I spent most of the year eating out of the day-old food bin at the 7-Eleven. And I discovered if you are in Japan, the cemetery is a great place to spend the night, because the Japanese are very superstitious, so they never go in there, but because these are Japanese cemeteries, they clean the graves all the time, so there's always a faucet, and if you're a clean freak, you can sneak behind a gravestone and wash your hair. Anyway, why did I choose this incredibly expensive country? One of the reasons was practical. I had done judo for 9 years competitively. I turned 32. I hadn't heard the lecture this morning, and so my body was starting to get older. I realized I wasn't bouncing very well off the mat. I was getting injured. I wasn't recovering. I'd always planned to go and study judo for a year in Japan, and I realized if it didn't happen soon, I was not going to be able to handle these cement-hard mats in Japan and the cement-hard instructors. And so it was sort of a now or never thing. The other reason, am I speaking loud enough? Yes. Thank you. The other reason was really that Japan to me was the ultimate challenge. And those of you who've been to Japan, and there's quite a lot of you in here, you're going to cringe at the naivete of this statement. My purpose was to get behind the Japanese face, essentially to become Japanese. And here I am, in both naive and arrogant. I'm not touching my body anymore. Thinking, I've done this before, I speak a few languages, I've lived with remote cultures and squatters' villages and so on. How hard can it be? Well, before I left, I went and talked to an old friend of mine, a professor who had spent 25 years in Japan. He had a Japanese wife and raised his children there. He collected old prints. And I told him about my plans to go to Japan, to become Japanese, integrate, and all of that. And he looked at me for a while and he said, well, what do your friends think of all of this? And I kind of admitted that it wasn't very good. Basically, they all thought it wasn't going to work. And he said, are you going to do it anyway? And I said, hell yeah. And there was another pause, and he said, then you are not Japanese. And boy, was he right. But he put it in a nutshell. Anyway, for those of you who have been to Japan or have seen pictures of Japan, here's the problem. When you go and live with the Maasai or the Bushmen, you expect things to be different. You're going to be in a cow dung hut. Life sort of hits you in the face. But when you step off the plane in Narita, everything looks so Western. There are lights, and when the light is red, everybody stops, and all the businessmen they have their suitcases, and their hair is parted 7/10 of the way to one side, and it looks precisely like what you would expect, and so you don't expect it to be different. And yet, I have to say that my experience in Japan, that culture is more different from the West than any other culture I have ever been in, including the Maasai and the Bushmen and squatters' villages. I mean, it's a fundamentally different ball of yarn. If you think of society as a core set of values wrapped with a lot of cultural yarn, we have two separate balls. We have Japan and we have the West. And anybody who goes to Japan and doesn't understand that these are separate balls and doesn't sort of try and get to those different values and then look at Japan through that different value system is going to have a hard time, because they're going to continually misinterpret. And it's easy to do because Tokyo and Kyoto and so on, they look extremely Western. And let me very quickly give one caveat here. I cannot, in 45 minutes, describe an entire culture, so I will be speaking in stereotypes.
It's the one.
It's this. I'm not cutting my hair. Yeah. I'm just thinking, how much can I strip? I know it's a liberal arts college, but I think they're also going to put this on the web, which, anyway. So understand that these are generalizations and stereotypes, and by their definition, they're wrong because they're a stereotype. But and I'm not judging either system. Both the Japanese and the Western system work. I will fix this on the next video. Can I even do this? No. Okay. Wait for the next video clip, and I'm just going to stand here like a scarecrow. Yes, exactly. The wardrobe misfunction. Okay. Thank you. Why didn't this happen to the last guy? He was wearing a suit. Okay. Both of these sides have their merits, but as an example, in the West, we value independence. The Japanese value teamwork and harmony. We value risk. The Japanese value stability and security. These are very important to them. I'm not moving. It's my hair.
It's where it's plugged in the back.
Okay.
Check the connection.
We value equality. It's fundamental to American sort of system and beliefs. The Japanese value hierarchy and obligation. That's how their system is structured. And what I'm going to do in this period is basically to talk about some of these differences, mostly by telling you stories. It's going to be very different from the last lecture where there are all sorts of stats and things up there. I'm going to be a little Japanese about this. I'm going to try and describe the society by drawing it with these stories. So maybe I did learn something over there, but understand that the way I'm doing this is how a Japanese might try and pass on information. They don't tend to be all that direct. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by describing a cultural trait, and then I will give you the inevitable exception, usually at my own expense, and then I will show you what happens when you ignore that trait, what the punishment is in society, also at my own expense. But let me start with the first and foremost, which is the Japanese love of rules. That hit me really hard because rules are not my strong point. I don't think in general that they're really an American strong point. I think we Americans are natural rule breakers. If you think about who our heroes are, John Wayne, who rides in and rescues a woman and rides off into the sunset. Bill Gates, who dropped out of college and became the richest man in the world. I mean, these are our cultural heroes. The Japanese value harmony. They see conforming to the rules as a strength. We see it as a weakness. I remember one woman describing a man to me, not that I was dating in Japan, since I'm at 35 and single and undateable. It was worse than when I was at Williams, trust me. But she described this man as always brushing his teeth precisely at 11 p.m. And to her, this was a tremendous compliment. And I was thinking this wouldn't go over very well on Match.com. It's just... Or another very quick example, I was on the bullet train and I sat down with a businessman and we started talking, and he turned to me and he said, really with honest bafflement, he said, if you have a man and a woman and a black person and a white person sitting at the same table, how can you ever reach an agreement? You don't think the same way. And the Japanese see their strength as their conformity. It will be braided very shortly as soon as the next clip goes. They could, and they've done this twice, created an economic miracle. Basically, the government makes a declaration. Oh, bless you. One last minute, please. This is Williams. Thank you. Nobody's ever done that before. They have twice managed to basically, the government says the word, and 126 million people reach over and grab their belt, and they tighten it. And for the next 3 decades, they move in lockstep, and it works. They have rebuilt their economy twice. Once when the Americans first came in, a Meiji Restoration, the second time after the Second World War. And they see that as their strength. Back in 1989, their prime minister made an announcement, and they said America's done quite well despite its burden of blacks and Hispanics. And this was a worldwide global outrage, and the Japanese were baffled. Not because their prime minister had said that, but because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. To them, that's a strength. To us, our diversity is our strength. These are just very different systems. Let me very briefly describe to you how these rules tend to manifest themselves in Japan. And this is a very brief reading from the book that I wrote, which did not displace Harry Potter from the bestseller list. No, I wouldn't put money on it. Okay. I have a sneaking suspicion that an umbrella is a bit of a security blanket for many Japanese, rather like the soft and fuzzy nook I used to carry around with me when I was 5, and one day accidentally incinerated on a floor heater. If there's a hint of rain, just one errant cloud in the sky, umbrellas start popping up like mushrooms on rotten wood. Shops have extra ones that they give out to customers who might otherwise suffer some terrible, soggy fate. It's just possible that the Japanese are water-soluble and don't want the world to know. I don't carry an umbrella. My backpack weighs 88 pounds, and that's only after I threw out my flashlight trashy novel, the bottom half of my toothbrush, and my toilet paper. I'm not water soluble, so if it rains, I just get wet. One day, as I'm leaving a small pension in Tottori on the backside of Japan, it starts to drizzle. The old lady who owns the place calls after me to wait. She ducks back into her kitchen and reemerges with a monstrous purple umbrella. It's made of wood and oiled paper and is sadly scuffed and splintered. She hands it to me. I thank her and hand it back. The thing weighs at least 4 pounds and has a little yellow knob on the top that makes it look like a cross between a giant pimple and a bruise. We stand there and pass it back and forth until I give in, bow profusely, and shuffle off down the road, clutching the center column of my new semi-portable wood and paper ceiling. 2 days and several hundred miles later, I can't stand it anymore. The umbrella doesn't fit into my pack, won't hook over my arm, and since it hasn't rained for a while, is about as useful as a stick of firewood. I decide to lose it. Unfortunately, Japan has only 2 kinds of public garbage receptacles, one for recycled soda cans and the other for newspapers. I feel funny trying to stuff the umbrella through the little round hole meant for cans, and I'm terrified that someone will catch me frivolously disposing of what is clearly a valuable, tangible cultural asset. So I decide to send it to Umbrella Heaven, the lost and found department at the Japan railway system, where it can party forever with the hundreds of thousands of other umbrellas that get left on the trains each year. I pick a day when I have to make 5 connections, 2 of them on the famous bullet train, which stops at each station for less than a minute. It takes me the first connection to get up my nerve. I'm not used to publicly littering. Just the thought makes me hunker down and start looking out of the corner of my eyes like a criminal. Second connection. The train is standing room only. I get up and edge my way to the door. Someone calls out to me. I ignore them. Someone else stops me and gestures over my shoulder. The purple umbrella is making its way towards me, hand over hand. I accept it with many apologies, deep appreciation, and even deeper bows, then stand outside the train, waving at a smiling carriage full of good citizens. They wave back. Third connection. This one is a bullet train with plush seats and only a scattering of people. I sit down next to an obasan, a granny, who compliments me on my umbrella. This is a bad sign. I pray that she either gets off or dozes off. Not a chance. She is alert, awake, and solidly seated. When it comes time for me to go, I see her eyeing my stuff, and I know that it's useless. I reach for my umbrella. She smiles and nods and tells me to take care and good luck. My next connection is local. I get on. I don't talk to anyone. I don't make eye contact. I quickly stuff the purple umbrella into the rack above me, push it way back, and put something on top of it. When we reach my stop, I wait until the last minute, sling on my gear, and scurry out the door. I sprint up the steps and down to the next platform. My train is due in less than 3 minutes. Things are looking good. I half expect the umbrella to magically appear behind me, flying through the air by itself like Mary Poppins. A minute ticks by. Nothing happens. I'm free. I feel like doing a little jig. With 4 less pounds to carry, I may even indulge myself with the luxury of a newspaper at the next stop. I hear a shout. In English. I'm the only Caucasian in the station. I turn. I can't help it. A young man in a schoolboy's uniform is standing on the platform outside my old train, waving my umbrella. I wave back a lot less enthusiastically. Even if I wanted to, I can't go back and get the umbrella or I'll miss my connection. I feel awkward pretending ignorance while this poor fellow is frantically trying to communicate across 2 crowded platforms, but the problem will resolve itself as soon as my train arrives. Suddenly, the young man stops signaling and dashes up the stairs. I pray for my train. No good. He's young. He's fast. He's at the top of my platform, taking the steps 3 at a time. He comes to a panting stop in front of me. He bows. I bow. He offers me my umbrella. I express vast surprise and gushing gratitude. I've already decided to own up to ownership. Someone has clearly seen me with the umbrella and can identify me, and that's how the police in this country solve 95% of their crimes. My train pulls up. He gives me my umbrella. I try to give it back to him as a thank you gift. He won't accept it. I bow. He bows. I bow. He bows. I miss my train. then, as he disappears in desperate bounds up the stairs to his platform, his train pulls away. When I'm about to get off my last train, I notice that it's raining. I grab my umbrella and tuck it under one arm. What's a couple of pounds anyway? I'm even starting to like the color purple. That's how the society works and runs. But as I said, for every rule there is an exception. And so this next video clip is going to be, I'm sorry I should give you a warning, an example of how you can get away by breaking the rules, although there are, of course, penalties. And I will come back a new human being.
With fall just around the corner, leaf gazing becomes a national obsession. And nowhere do I find the colors more impressive than Gembi Gorge. But something's going on here. The crowds are huge, and more are coming by the minute, all here to watch a basket flying across the gorge. Here's the idea. You put your money in the basket, tap the hammer, and off it goes. Someone on the other end relieves you of your money, and when the basket comes back across, it's got lunch inside at about $3 a serving, and the tea is free. But I'm less interested in the meal than in the mysterious man on the other side.